Hello again. Today our objective, what we're going to be looking at, is how we can subtract integers. So the first thing we need to know about this is our definition of the additive inverse. When I tell you to do this, I'm going to tell you to use the additive inverse, so we need to know what that is. When we refer to the additive inverse, we simply mean the opposite of a number. If you'll recall back from one of the previous lessons, the opposite means basically it's on the other side of the number line, but the same distance from zero. Basically, we flip-flop the sign would be the shorter version of that, the additive inverse. Fancy word for opposite. So what are we going to do when we try to subtract integers? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite it as an addition problem, and you know how to add them because we went over that lesson yesterday. So to subtract integers, we're going to rewrite it as addition by adding the additive inverse. So what that means is I'm going to change a couple of numbers. So I've given us a problem, 12 minus 15. Well, what you'll know is if you have 12 cookies, you can't eat 15 of them, right? Well, not anymore. Now we can because we understand negative numbers. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to rewrite this number. I'm keeping the first number, 12 stays the same. I'm changing this to an addition problem. Now instead of subtraction, I'm adding, but what I'm doing is I'm adding my additive inverse. Instead of subtracting a positive 15, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a negative 15. This is actually the same thing. These two problems are equal. It's the same problem written in a different form. So we're going to rewrite it because we know how to add. Then what are we going to do? We're going to follow our rules for addition. Well, now what you'll notice is we're adding two numbers that have unlike signs. One is positive, one is negative, which means what am I going to do? I'm going to wind up subtracting them after I take the absolute values. So let's take the absolute value of 12 and the absolute value of 15. I wind up with 12 and 15. Well, I'm going to flip-flop the order of those. Why? Because I'm subtracting the smaller from the larger. So 15 minus 12 gives me what? Well, it gives me 3. But down here I've written negative 3. Why? Well, 15 is the bigger number. It was originally negative, so my answer is negative. Those are your rules for adding. If you've forgotten those, go back and rewatch that video. It'll help you out. So the big thing we need to remember, and I sometimes use this because I tend to be the only Yankee fan here, the dreaded New York Yankees. You hate math, you hate the Yankees, so this is how you can remember it. No, I don't do anything to the first number. That's going to stay the same. Yes, I'm going to change my subtraction into an addition problem. And yes, I'm going to change this number to its opposite, negative 15, from 15 to negative 15. So let's try a few of those. So here we just want to find the difference. So my first step simply tells me rewrite it using the additive inverse. And what you'll see me do is I sometimes get lazy. Instead of rewriting the problem, I'll just do it that way. I'll cross my minus to make it a plus, and then I'll just change the sign of the second one. So here I now have negative 5 plus a negative 8. I'm now adding numbers that have the same sign. So if you'll recall, I told you to take our absolute value of each. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8. Since they have similar signs or the same signs, we're going to add those two digits. 8 plus 5 is 13. They were both negative in the original problem, so my answer is negative 13. Take a look over here. Here, again, you'll notice the parentheses. They're just making sure that you don't think it's one big, long minus sign. I'm saying I want 5 minus a negative 8. So again, what are we going to do? We're going to rewrite it using our additive inverse. So don't do anything to your first one. 5 stays the same. Yes, I want to change this sign to an addition sign. Yes, I want to change this to its additive inverse or its opposite. What is the opposite of negative 8? Positive 8. I now have 5 plus 8. We don't really need to go through our rules for that. They're both positive. You've been doing that your whole math careers. Again, 5 plus 8 gives me 13. They were both positive. It's a positive 13. Here, again, remember, we want to simplify before we try to subtract. So here you'll notice these are not parentheses. This is our absolute value sign. Parentheses curve, our absolute value sign is straight. So the first thing I need to do is take my absolute value. The absolute value of 15 is 15. So I wind up with 6 minus 15. Well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to add my additive inverse. I'm now adding two numbers with different signs. So I'm going to wind up subtracting their absolute values. The absolute value of negative 15, and I'm starting with this because it's going to be the bigger number, is 15. The absolute value of 6 is 6. So we'll subtract those two numbers, and we'll wind up with 9. 15 was my bigger number. It was negative. My answer is negative 9. Over here, again, I'll notice I have absolute value and I have the parentheses. Again, the parentheses are just telling me I'm subtracting this negative 8. They stop you from thinking this is one big minus sign. So let's start with our absolute value. What's our absolute value of 16? 16. Okay, now we've simplified. Now how do I subtract? I'm going to rewrite it by adding my additive inverse. So now I have 16 plus a positive 9. That is 25. Adding two positive numbers, we've been doing that. Again, you'll recall yesterday we looked at one like this where I have my absolute value sign. That means do the math, then take the absolute value. And then you'll notice the negative out here. So after I take the absolute value, I'm going to add that negative back in. But first, let's just look at our first step, our subtraction problem. We rewrite it as addition by adding our additive inverse. 6 plus 4 gives me 10. I want the absolute value of 10, which is 10. The negative sign was outside the absolute value, so it's going to stick with our number as it comes down. Our answer is negative 10.